On my 20th birthday, my parents gave me only $10, saying, "You deserve this." Then, my grandma stood up and gifted me $150,000. But the very next day, my parents forced me to hand over the money, claiming, "We need this more than you." My grandma laughed and shocked them a second time with, "What happened next was, my name is Susan, and I just finished high school. I live, or I guess I should say lived, with my parents, Jessica and Kevin Mitnick, in a small 3-story house in Maryland. I also have an older brother, Mark. He moved out a few years ago to a nearby city. He's 26 now, 8 years older than me, and has always been the favorite. Growing up, I saw how my parents did everything for Mark. If he showed even a little interest in something, they made sure he had the best. When he wanted to play hockey, they bought him top-quality gear. When he got into drawing, they got him the finest art supplies. When he wanted to skateboard, they got him a custom board. It didn't matter that he lost interest after a few months. They were always ready to spend money on whatever he wanted next. One Christmas, I remember something that really hurt. Mark's birthday is a week before Christmas. The year he turned 17, my parents bought him an expensive gaming computer he had been talking about for months. It must have cost a fortune. Then on Christmas morning, I opened my gift and found a card that just said Merry Christmas. They told me they had run out of money. That's how it always was. Mark's birthdays were big celebrations with amazing gifts. For Christmas, I got whatever was left, if anything. My birthdays? They barely noticed. Maybe a small cake, a new shirt, or some school supplies. No parties, no special moments. That's why I was completely shocked when my parents sat me down in the living room last week, just days after I graduated. "Susan," Mom said, smoothing her shirt like she always does when she's trying to act normal, "we've been thinking, you're turning 19 soon and that's a big deal. We want to throw you a real party." I almost choked on my coffee. "A party?" I asked. I must have heard wrong. Dad nodded, looking more excited than usual. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll invite the whole family and make it a real celebration." I just sat there, staring at them. Something felt off. My parents weren't the type to suddenly change their ways for no reason. I could feel it in my gut. There had to be a catch. "Why now?" asked, trying not to sound too suspicious. "You've never wanted to throw me a party before." Mom waved her hand like it was no big deal. "Well, you're graduating high school and going to college soon. It's different now. You're becoming an adult." I nodded slowly, but something still didn't feel right. The way they were acting, the sudden interest in celebrating my birthday, it was all too convenient. But I couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong. Over the next few days, I actually started looking forward to the party. Maybe I was being too harsh. After all, it made sense. I was turning 19, had graduated with honors, and was heading to college. Maybe my parents finally realized I deserved some attention too. I kept catching Mom on the phone, speaking in a low voice about party plans. She was ordering a fancy cake, choosing decorations, and making a guest list. Even Dad seemed unusually involved, cleaning up the backyard and fixing the wobbly patio furniture he had ignored for months. "Do you need any help?" I asked one afternoon when I found Mom in the kitchen surrounded by party planning notes. She jumped a little and quickly gathered the papers. No, sweetie. We want this to be a surprise. Just focus on enjoying your special day." I shrugged and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "Okay, if you're sure. By the way, is Mark coming?" "Of course, he is," Mom said, but something in her voice sounded off. He wouldn't miss his little sister's big day. I wanted to believe her, but Mark hadn't answered any of my texts all week. Typical Mark, always too busy with his own life to care about anyone else's. 3 days before the party, I went downstairs for a glass of water. That's when I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. I normally wouldn't listen in on my parents' conversations, but something about Dad's tone made me stop at the top of the stairs. "Kevin, are you sure everything will be perfect?" Mom sounded nervous. "Your mother is very picky about these things." I froze. Grandma Margaret was coming? She lived in New York and hardly ever visited. The last time I saw her was almost 3 years ago. "Jessica, we have to make this work," Dad said quickly. "Mom needs to see that we're making an effort with Susan. You know how she feels about how we treat the kids." I know. Mom sighed. "She's always saying we favor Mark, and we really can't afford to upset her right now. That money she gave us last year is the only thing keeping us afloat. If she decides to stop helping us," their voices got lower, but I had already heard enough. Suddenly, everything made sense. The surprise party, the decorations, the excitement, none of it was about me. They weren't celebrating my birthday because they cared. They were doing it to impress Grandma Margaret. I sank down onto the top step, my chest tight with disappointment. Grandma Margaret had always been different from my parents. She never fell for Mark's charm and actually paid attention to me. Every time she visited, she pointed out how unfairly I was treated. And she was rich. She lived in a beautiful old house in New York and had helped my parents with money several times. Now it was clear. My parents weren't throwing this party to make up for years of ignoring me. They were putting on a show, pretending to be good parents so Grandma Margaret would keep helping them financially. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to the sound of voices outside. Mom's overly cheerful tone carried through the open window. I peeked outside, and my heart jumped. Grandma Margaret was here, stepping out of her simple Toyota Camry. I quickly threw on some clothes and rushed downstairs, almost crashing into Dad in the hallway. The moment Grandma saw me, her face lit up with a warm smile, something I hadn't seen much of in this house. She opened her arms, and I ran straight into them. "There's my beautiful girl," she said, hugging me tight. She smelled like fresh-baked cookies and that soft lavender soap she always used. She pulled back and looked me over, her eyes sparkling. "A high school graduate already. What's next for you, sweetheart?" We moved into the living room where Mom had arranged the furniture to look like something out of a home decor magazine. I sat next to Grandma on the sofa while my parents sat nervously on the edge of their seats. Well, I started trying to ignore Mom's intense stare. I actually got accepted into several colleges. 2 of them offered me spots. "That's wonderful." Grandma squeezed my hand. "Tell me about them." "The state university offered me a full scholarship," I said, noticing my parents nodding approvingly. "And then there's Brixworth College." I hesitated. My parents thought this wasn't an option. "It's a really great private school, but tuition is about $30,000 a year." Grandma nodded thoughtfully, a small smile on her lips. She didn't say anything, but something about her expression made me think she was already coming up with a plan. The doorbell rang as guests started arriving. First Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Timothy, then my cousins, followed by some family friends. Mom rushed around, playing the perfect hostess, while Dad grilled food in the backyard. But one person was missing: Mark. I tried calling him 4 times, but each time it went straight to voicemail. When I asked Mom about him, she just said he was busy with his auto parts business but would definitely congratulate me later. By mid-afternoon, the party was in full swing. The backyard was filled with the sound of relatives chatting and the smell of grilled food. I tried to enjoy myself, but something felt off. My parents kept hovering around Grandma Margaret, making sure her glass was always full and her plate never empty. They were acting way too eager to please. I just finished a piece of birthday cake when Grandma suddenly stood up, tapping her fork against her glass. The chatter stopped, and everyone turned to look at her. "I'd like to say something," she announced, her voice strong and clear. "Today, we're celebrating not just Susan's 19th birthday, but also her acceptance into college." She smiled warmly at me. "Susan, honey, I've watched you grow into an incredible young woman. Unlike some people," she paused for a second, "you've always worked hard and never taken anything for granted." My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I saw Mom nervously tearing apart a paper napkin. "When you told me about your acceptance to Brixworth College," Grandma continued, "I could see how much you wanted to go, even though you thought it was out of reach." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "That's why I've decided to give you a special gift." She walked over and handed me the envelope. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a check, and when I saw the amount, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I blinked and looked again. $150,000. Grandma smiled at the shocked crowd. "Enough to cover your tuition at Brixworth College." For a moment, everything was silent. Then chaos. Aunt Rebecca let out a gasp so loud it could have sucked the air out of the yard. Uncle Timothy started clapping, and soon everyone joined in. My cousins were cheering and shouting. I just sat there, staring at the check, tears running down my face. This wasn't just money. This was freedom. A chance to go to my dream school without drowning in debt. "Grandma," I choked out, standing up to hug her. "I can't believe this. Thank you so much." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my parents. They weren't clapping. Mom looked pale, and Dad looked like he had been hit by a truck. They were whispering to each other, glancing at the check in my hands. I spent the rest of the evening with Grandma. She told me stories about her college days and gave me advice about living on campus. For the first time, someone in my family was actually excited about my future. As the sun set, guests started leaving. The yard was covered with empty plates and half-finished drinks. Grandma decided to spend the night, saying she was too tired to drive home. I helped her get settled in the guest room, happy to have a little more time with her. The next morning, after breakfast, Grandma hugged me tightly and promised to call soon to help me plan for college. I watched her car disappear down the street, still barely believing what had happened. That evening, Mark finally showed up. He walked in without knocking, looking like he'd been sucking on lemons. His expensive designer clothes were wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Happy birthday, sis," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. No hug, no card, not even a small gift. He went straight to the kitchen where our parents were, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. Dinner that night was so tense, you could cut the air with a knife. Mark sat across from me, slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone. Dad cleared his throat a few times before finally speaking. "Susan, honey, we need to have a serious family discussion," he said, setting down his fork. He glanced at Mark. "Your brother has been going through a rough time. His auto parts business, well, things haven't been going as planned." Mark finally looked up from his phone. His face was pale and tired. "The banks are all over me," he muttered. "I took out loans to expand, but the market crashed. Now they want their money back." I let out a short laugh. "Really? Because your Instagram shows you in Lee Hugh last month with different girls in every photo." Mark's face turned red. "Stay out of my social media," he snapped. "That's none of your business." "Calm down, both of you," Dad interrupted. "Susan, this is serious. Your brother could lose everything." I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. "What does this have to do with me?" Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks, the kind that meant they had planned this conversation in advance. "Well, sweetheart," Mom said in her sweetest voice, "family always helps family. That's what we've always taught you, right?" A cold feeling crept over me. I suddenly knew where this was going. "We think," Dad continued, "that the money Grandma gave you could really help Mark out of this situation." I stared at them in shock. "You want me to give Mark my college money? It makes perfect sense." Mark jumped in, suddenly excited. "My business is already set up. It's more important than some college degree you might not even use. That money is for my education," I said, my voice rising. "Grandma gave it to me for Bricksworth." "You got a full ride to state," Mom argued. "You can still go to college, but Mark needs this money now." "No." The word came out firm and clear. "That money is mine. Grandma gave it to me." Their faces changed instantly. Dad shot up from his chair, his hand gripping my wrist like a vice. "You go to your room right now," he snarled, yanking me away from the table. I cried out in pain, but he ignored me. "And you'll stay there until you come to your senses. Don't even think about calling your grandmother. If you tell her anything, you're out of this house forever. Do you understand me? We will disown you." That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house settle. My wrist still ached where Dad had grabbed me. Around midnight, I heard my parents and Mark talking downstairs. Their voices were low and angry, but I couldn't make out the words. Eventually, the house went quiet. By 6 a.m., I had made up my mind. I pulled my backpack from under the bed and started packing. First, my important documents: birth certificate, social security card, high school diploma. Then my laptop, some clothes, toiletries. I checked my wallet. I had about $500 saved from my part-time job at the library. The check from Grandma was safely hidden inside a book. I kept the check on my nightstand. Now, I carefully added it to my documents, double-checking that everything important was safe. Moving quietly, like a ghost, I crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The house was dark and silent, except for Dad's loud snoring from the master bedroom. In the living room, I grabbed my phone charger. In the kitchen, I took a few granola bars. The morning air was cool as I slipped out the back door. I didn't look back. At the train station, my phone started buzzing. Mom's name flashed on the screen. Declined. Mark called next. Declined. Dad, declined. Then the messages started flooding in. "Where are you? Come home right now. You're being ridiculous. Think about your brother. If you don't come back immediately, you'll regret it." I turned off notifications and bought a train ticket to New York. The train wouldn't leave for another hour, so I sat in the station cafe, gripping my backpack tightly against my chest. Every noise made me jump. By late afternoon, I finally reached Grandma Margaret's house. She opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. "Susan, what on earth?" She pulled me inside. "Your father called me this morning," she said, closing the door behind us. "He told me you ran off with some boy, and were planning to waste your college money on parties." "That's a lie," I blurted out. I took a deep breath, my hand shaking. "They want me to give the money to Mark," I said. "His business is failing, and they tried to force me to hand over my college fund. When I refused, I touched my wrist where bruises were already forming. Dad locked me in my room and threatened me if I told you." Grandma's face changed from worried to furious. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and dialed Dad's number, putting it on speaker. "Kevin," she said sharply. "Yes, Susan's here." "Oh, thank God." Dad's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mom, she's been acting out, making up stories." "Save it." Grandma cut him off. She spoke coldly. "She told me everything. About Mark's failing business, about you trying to steal her college fund, about you threatening her." "She's lying." Mom's voice chimed in. "She's just being dramatic." I said, "Save it." Grandma's voice was like ice. "For years, I've watched you favor Mark. I've watched you spoil him while ignoring Susan. And I've helped you financially over and over again, hoping you would change." She took a deep breath. "Well, I'm done. From this moment, you can consider my financial support ended. And tomorrow, I'll be calling my lawyer to update my will. You and Mark won't be seeing a single penny." Then she hung up. She turned to me, her face softening. "You'll stay here with me until college starts," she said firmly. "And don't worry about a thing." Living with Grandma Margaret was like stepping into a whole new world. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and whatever she was baking. Her specialty was apple pie, but she also made the best blueberry muffins. I helped around the house doing the cleaning and laundry, not because Grandma asked me to, I just wanted to do my part. We fell into a simple routine, sharing meals, watching old movies, and talking about everything and nothing. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mom, Dad, and Mark tried everything. Calls, texts, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Their messages went from guilt-tripping to angry to manipulative. I ignored them all. The summer passed quietly. Finally, August arrived, and it was time for me to start at Brixworth. Grandma helped me move into my dorm, making my bed with fresh sheets and arranging my things neatly. My roommate, Emma, seemed nice, and for the first time in my life, I felt excited about the future. The first month of college flew by. Classes were tough, but fascinating. I made friends. I even joined the campus newspaper. For once, I wasn't living in Mark's shadow. I was just Susan, finding my own way. Then one Friday, my resident advisor knocked on my door. "Susan, your parents are here. They're waiting at the campus coffee shop." My stomach dropped. I knew this was going to happen eventually. I found them sitting at a corner table. They looked different, tired, deflated. "Susan," Mom said, reaching for my hand. I kept mine firmly in my lap. "You look good. What do you want?" I asked, getting straight to the point. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We wanted to apologize," he said. "We were wrong to try and take your college money. We were wrong to threaten you. We were wrong about a lot of things." I stayed quiet, waiting. There was always more with them. Dad cleared his throat. "We were hoping, maybe you could talk to your grandmother about her will. We're not asking for your money anymore, but no." I said it simply. "If you want to fix things with Grandma, talk to her yourselves. I'm not getting involved." They exchanged frustrated looks. "Susan, be reasonable," Dad started. "I am being reasonable," I said. "For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. If you want to fix things with Grandma, that's between you and her." Mom's face hardened. "So that's it? You won't help your family at all?" I stood up, gathering my things. You know what's funny?" I said, "when you wanted my money, it was family helps family, but you never helped me ever. It only goes one way with you, doesn't it?" I got a call from Aunt Rebecca. At first, I almost didn't answer. She had always been more on Mom's side, but something made me pick up. "Susan, are you sitting down?" she asked in a hushed voice, like she was about to share a huge secret. "I thought you should know what's happening back home. Mark's business, it's completely failed. He owes the banks hundreds of thousands. He's moved back in with your parents." I let that sink in. Mark, the same Mark who had always looked down on my college plans, was back in his childhood bedroom. "And your parents," Aunt Rebecca continued, "they're using their retirement savings to help him. They're even talking about taking out a second mortgage on the house." Later that week, Grandma called. "I had some visitors today," she said, sounding tired. "Your parents showed up at my doorstep, begging me to help with Mark's debts. Said they were going to lose everything." She paused. I told them no. I said they needed to deal with this themselves for once. "How did they take it?" I asked. "As well as you'd expect," she sighed. "Your mother cried. Your father got angry, but I stood my ground. I told them this was the result of years of spoiling Mark while ignoring you." As the semester went on, more news trickled in through family members. Dad had taken a second job. Mom was selling her jewelry, and Mark, somehow, still had the nerve to buy a new iPhone while living at home rent-free. During fall break, I stayed with Grandma. We baked pies together and she helped me with my research for a term paper. She had even set up a proper guest room for me, complete with a desk and everything I needed for studying. One evening, she brought up my midterm grades. "Your grades came in," she said with a proud smile. "Straight A's. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Grandma." I hesitated before asking, "Do you ever regret cutting them off?" She put down her knitting and looked at me seriously. "Not for a second." Then she added, "Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for people is let them face the consequences of their actions." She was right, of course. Sometimes, I felt a little guilty when I heard about my family's financial struggles. But then I remembered all the years of favoritism, all the Christmases where I got a card while Mark got expensive gifts, all the times they ignored my achievements but celebrated Mark's smallest successes. I was doing great at Brixworth, making friends, getting top grades, and planning for a future I had chosen. Meanwhile, my parents were dealing with the mess they had created. It was never my job to fix their mistakes. Last I heard, Mark was already talking about a new business idea and my parents were still trying to find a way to fund it. Some habits are hard to break, I guess, but I had broken free, thanks to Grandma's gift and, more importantly, her belief in me.